Welcome to Sewing with Sandy. Today we are going to sew a knit t-shirt. Sewing with knits is pretty easy. It just takes a few little different skills than from sewing with wovens, and we're going to use Cashemerette's Concord T Shirt pattern. If you haven't used one of their patterns yet, you will love them. Their patterns are for more of a curvy body, and they just do such a great job grading patterns from one size to the next. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to take measurements to decide which size pattern piece that you want. Now it's a knit, so it has negative ease. So the pattern measurements are a little different because the finished garment is actually going to be smaller than your body measurements because you want the knit to fit, right? You don't want it hanging on you like you would with a woven. So in order to take your body measurements, you need to take at least two measurements. You have your hip and your waist. Certainly you want to take those into account. But to determine which cup size you want to make, you want to take a high bust measurement, which is here above your bust, and then the full bust measurement. And those measurements will help you determine what size you want to make when you cut out their pattern. So that's the first place to start. And then you have, with this pattern, there are so many options for the way that you can make this pattern. So there is a cropped length, a mid-length, and a long curved length. So I'm going to make the long curved length. There is a high neck, a boat neck, or it's a V-neck, sorry, a V-neck and a scoop neck, and I'm going to make the scoop neck. You can do short sleeves, you can do long sleeves, you can do mid sleeves, and you can do mid sleeves or short sleeves with a cuffed hem. So you can make like 30 of these t-shirts in every color that you could possibly want, and they'll all be different. You can mix and match all of the different pieces and parts and come up with a whole closet full of t-shirts that are perfect. And so this is what makes this pattern like one of those patterns that you are going to go to over and over and over again, because we need t-shirts in our pattern, in our closet, in our wardrobe. We wear them constantly. I have one. This is a different pattern, but it's made with this black fabric that I am going to use. It's a black tone on tone. I'll throw up a photo here because it's hard to see with the camera. And I'm going to use this black tone on tone stripe to make my Cashemerette Concord T for this video. And we're going to learn about sewing knits. So I am going to make view C, which is the long curved hem version with a scoop neck. And I'm going to use a mid sleeve with no sleeve tabs. I'm going to do a cuffed mid sleeve because I like this kind of length on my clothing. It works well for me. I'm short, so I like a 3/4 length cuff. I think proportionally it looks really well on me, although the long ones are great to have in the summertime. The short ones, you are going to love this pattern. I can't stress enough how much you're going to love it. And once you nail sewing knits, you are going to be cranking these puppies out, let me tell you. All right, so I'm going to come around to the camera and I'm going to show you exactly all the options and which one I'm going to choose. So here we are in front of the camera. This is the cropped tee. It's perfect. It's really cute. This is the front and the back drawing. And then this is the full length, mid-length tee that has a straight bottom. And then this is the full length tee and it has a curved bottom and has little slits on the side. So this is the length that I'm going to do. And then you have a high neck, you have a V-neck, and you have a scoop neck. So I'm going to do the scoop neck for this version that I'm making today, but you can make any of the other ones. It's exactly the same process. And then again, there's a short sleeve, there's a long sleeve, this also is a mid sleeve, and then this version has a sleeve tab and a cuff with little buttons, and you can do that with the mid sleeve or with the short sleeve. So we're going to do the curved version with the scoop neck with a regular sleeve. So that brings us to the pattern pieces. Now I've already measured myself and I know what size I'm going to make. I'm making version C. Whoops, I'm making version C. This is the long, I'm making version C. This is the long one with the scoop bottom. So I'm going to start with that. So I need version C. You have, these are cup sizes on the pattern pieces. So you have 1A, 1B, and 1C. 1A is the front for C and D cup, 1B is the front for E and F cup, and 1C is the front for G and H cup. So I'm going to use 1A because I fall within that category. And then I'm also going to cut it. You can see these cut lines. There's a crop line, this is for the straight line, and then this is for the longer version. So this is perfect. I need piece 1A, and then I need piece 2, which is the back, and those are all the same. And then for the neckband, you choose either the high necked band, the V neck band, or the scoop neck band. So you have 3A, 3B, and 3C. So I'm going to take 3C because I'm making the scooped neckband. The sleeve is the same. You just choose the sleeve, and then the manipulations are actually on the pattern piece. And then you have 5 is the cuff for the sleeve. So you have a short sleeve cuff, a mid sleeve cuff, and a long sleeve cuff. So I am making the mid sleeve. So I'm going to choose 5B. So you can see how it's like a cafeteria plan, right? You just pick and choose what you want. Sleeve tab, I'm not doing the sleeve tab, so I don't need that piece. And front facing I need for view C, and I need the back facing for view C. And you only need the facings if you're doing view C. So I'm going to go take my pieces, trim them up, and press them very lightly with my iron to make sure that they're nice and flat, because you don't want any wrinkles in your pattern. Another thing that you want to check is this stretch chart when you're working with stretch fabric. The pattern is designed so there's a certain amount of stretch that needs to be in the fabric so it works with your pattern. So what you do is you take your fabric and you just gently hold it here to where the fabric is supposed to be, and it needs to at least stretch to where the arrow goes to. So you start here and then you just pull the fabric to make sure it stretches enough. So this fabric is very stretchy and it's perfect for this. And then the other thing that you want to check is your seam allowances. And on this piece, on this garment, the seam allowances are 3/8 of an inch. So those are some of the things that we're going to get started with. And I'm going to go cut out my pieces for my Concord T. Okay, we are ready to get started on our Concord T. This is my front. You can see I have a scoop neck here. And the first set of instructions is to sew the shoulder seams together. So I'm going to sew the front and the back together at the shoulders, right sides together. Now, the instructions have the option of putting in a piece of clear elastic on the shoulders, and I have done that on garments in the past. I don't think it makes all that much difference in the longevity of the garment, but if it's something that makes you more comfortable, you certainly should go ahead and do it. I think the structure of the knits that we have these days is pretty good. I mean, if you buy a high quality knit, then it's not a problem. If you're working on something that's a little less expensive, then you might want to consider it, but this one is a very high quality knit. So I'm sewing my right sides together at the shoulders, and then I'm also going to take the neckband, and if you're making the scoop neck or the high neck, view A or view C, you want to sew this together too, right sides together, and we're going to just sew the end of this to make a big circle, because that's going to be the next step, is to put the neckband on. You should use either a serger, if you have one, to sew these seams, or the stretch stitch on your sewing machine. But a stretch stitch is definitely the way to go, because this fabric is going to stretch. You want your stitch to stretch with it. When you move, you don't, if the stitch doesn't stretch, you'll pop a seam, and nobody wants that to happen ever. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this, and we'll come back, we'll put the neckline on. All right, my top is prepped, the shoulder seams are sewn, and I have pressed the seams to the back as instructed. There we go. There we go. So my top is just sewn together at the shoulder seams, and I've sewn my neckband in a circle and pressed the seams open. So now what we're going to do is we're going to fold the neckband wrong sides together. Now remember, the seam allowances on this are 3/8 of an inch. And I'm going to fold this all the way around, matching up these edges. All right, I want to match up the raw edges so this band is pretty on both sides, which is essentially what we want. We want the wrong sides together so the right sides are on the outside. And then we're going to baste around the edges inside the seam allowance. So pretty much the width of your presser foot. because the seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch. So it'll be easier to sew if you press it. So you pin it and then press it, pin it like I'm doing. And with knits, you want to use pins. With a woven, you could probably press it and stitch it without the pins or without too many pins, but I'm going to pin this and press it, and I'm going to go and stitch this at about 1/4 of an inch all the way around. You can use a basting stitch. It doesn't have to be a stretch stitch. It's just to hold it together to make it one unit. So when you put it on, it's a lot easier and you don't have pieces flopping around. So you'll have more success if you do it this way. All right, my neckband has been sewn together, basted right around the edge. Now, pressing this makes it a lot easier, and with this particular fabric, there's this velvet line going through it, this diagonal line, so I need to use a press cloth. And some knits are going to be less susceptible to the steam. They're not going to like it, so press cloths are something that you really want to consider. The other thing you want to do is mark your notches. You can't just put this all the way around, because with a scoop neck, the length of the scoop is longer than the back of the neck. So you can't just fold this in half and have it be perfect to fit onto your neckband. And because this is smaller than your neck opening, you want to make sure that the ease is balanced. And the reason the binding is smaller is that it brings that neck in a little bit so it fits against your body. So you want to have that a little bit smaller. So all I did, this is my seam. So I've lined it up along my pattern piece, and where the notches are for my size, I put in a pin, and then at the center front I put in a pin. So I've pinned the notches and the center front, and then this seam that I sewed it together in goes in the center back. And what I want to do with my neck is so I can match these up, put my two shoulders together. I'm just going to pin them so they don't wiggle around. And then I can fold this and find my center back. And then I can go back to my shoulder seam and fold the front and find my center front. Now I can unpin my shoulder. So here's my neck edge. Here's my neck edge. So this is my shoulder seam. Here's my front. Here's my center back. I'm going to take my tape. I'm going to find that seam, and that is my center back. So I'm going to put that where that pin is. And then this pin here is my center front pin, so I'm going to match that up with my center front. And then these two other notches match up to my shoulder seams. And you can see how much smaller that is than the neck edge. So we want to balance this to make sure that you also don't want to twist it. That would be bad. Then you would have a crooked neck. So we want to make sure that it sucks in all of that extra fabric. It's really stretchy because my garment's hanging off the table here. All right, so now that we have our neckband all pinned, I'm going to try to divide these sections and add a second pin in here because we want to just make it a little bit easier to stretch. It's a pretty big neck opening. So we're going to take this to the machine and we're going to stretch the neckband as we sew a little bit so it fits the neck opening. And what that will do is that will suck in that neck opening and make it really pretty. So this is the way you put on any binding. You want all bindings to be like this. You want to be a little bit smaller than your neck opening because it will help make that neck opening more secure. So we're going to go ahead and stitch this and we'll be back. So a couple of things when you're sewing this on. You want to put the shirt side down to the feed dogs. That way you can let the feed dogs help you gather that in, and also it gives you the opportunity to see what you're stretching here. And if you're at all nervous, go ahead and stitch it once or baste it, just to make sure that when you look at it, it looks beautiful, because you don't want this section to be 3/4 of an inch and this section to be 1/4 of an inch. You want it to be balanced all the way around. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the seam allowance towards the garment, right, towards my top, and then I am going to take my twin needles and I am going to stitch that. And here it is. This is a twin needle, and I have a video on twin needles, so I will post the link to that down below on how to use it. But essentially, you replace your needle. It's flat in the back, you unscrew the needle that's in there and you put this one in, and then you have 2 threads coming through the top. And depending on your manufacturer's instructions on threading for a twin needle, typically you thread through the same place, and then 1 thread goes through one needle and 1 thread goes through the other. And the bobbin goes back and forth between those 2 threads, and what that does is that creates a little stretch in the stitch. But it also, because you're stitching here on the garment, you're going to be stitching not on this bias binding, but on the garment. So you're stitching these seam allowances down onto the garment and making them flat so they don't pop up, they don't roll, and it gives it a really nice commercial look finish, retail, high-end retail finish. So we're going to go ahead and do that next, and then our neckline's done. We are on our way. So our neckline is finished. It looks great. Looks professional. Looks high-end. Look at how beautifully flat that lays, right? That's so pretty. It's balanced, it's even. We're very happy with it. Right? And you can see that there's a little bit of puckering here. That's because this is smaller, but there is no pleating in here. So this is the kind of thing you need to take your time with, but take your time. It'll look beautiful when it's done, and you'll be very happy with it when you put it on and you go to wear it. So the next section is to sew in the sleeves. So we've done flat sewn in sleeves before, and that is the key when you're sewing a knit garment. And there's a couple of marks that you want to make sure that you have on your sleeve so you can get it in appropriately. So here's my sleeve pattern piece, my sleeve. And then here's my pattern tissue. And this goes. There is a right side and a wrong side, or a left side and a right side to the sleeve. So let me put this in your direction so you can see it. Here is my sleeve pattern. Remember, we're doing the 3/4 sleeve. And there's a couple of key marks. Now there is a correct way to put in a sleeve. There's a left and a right sleeve, and you need to make sure that you have them on the left and the right side. Excuse me. One of the marks that you need is this center mark, because this goes along the shoulder seam. So that makes a huge difference. I put a pin in each one of my pieces for a mark. You can use chalk, you can mark them. I would prefer you didn't snip into the seams. I think that just creates issues, and we don't need that. The other marks are these marks on the side here. So this one single mark is for the front, and the double mark is the back. The double marks are always in the back. So we want to make sure, that's an industry standard, so we want to mark the back. I just want to mark and let myself know that that's the back. Because this sleeve is going to go in so beautifully that I'm not worried about matching up these notches, but I do want to make sure that that is the back side. And if you look at your back piece, you will see that there's 2 notches there, and those 2 notches coincide with the 2 notches on the sleeve. So I want to make sure that, and that holds true with 99.9% of the patterns. So I want to make sure that my back is marked. So now my center of the sleeve, the shoulder seam is marked, and the back of my sleeve is marked. So I'm going to lay out my top. And this is the back. This is the front neckline. This is the back neckline. So I know this is the back, and I want to look at my sleeve right side up. Take the right side of my fabric. And where's my sleeve? Here we go. So this one is not this sleeve because this is the back, and I have that pin marked on the back. So I have the right side of my fabric up. I have the right side of my garment up. I like to lay out my pieces the way they're going to look once they're sewn together. That way I know when I sew them together, they're going to go go together correctly. So this pin here at the top of the sleeve matches up with my shoulder seam on my dress, on my top, and then this pin that I put in goes to the back of the garment, so I know that that goes to the back of the garment. So I'm going to flip these so they're right sides together, my garment, my top, and my sleeve, and I'm going to take this pin and pin my shoulder. So now my garment is pinned together the way, fetch this other pin out of there, the way that it's going to be sewn. And one of the things that I want to do is I want the sleeve on the bottom, so I want to put my pins on the top side. So I'm going to flip everything over, and now I start with the edge of my sleeve and I put it to the side seam of my top. And underneath your arm, from the side seam to where the notches are, it's 1 to 1, right? We don't need any gathering or any extra ease in underneath our arm. So I always do the first couple of inches on the left, and then I go over to the right, and I take this edge of my sleeve and the side seam of my top, and I line those up, and I pin the first couple of inches. And if you're at all nervous when you go to sew this, before you sew your little, zigzags knit stitch, just baste it and check it. All right, so now I have my underarms pinned from here to here and here to here, and then this is my shoulder seam, so I have that pinned. So now I need to fiddle these sections here between the underarm and the shoulder seam, and because it's a knit, it's just, you just pin it. If you start pinning, if you run into complications, just shift the pins around a little bit. There's a small amount of coercion that goes on here, but you can see I'm not tugging on anything. I'm just pulling the edges of the pieces together and taking these convex and concave seams and pinning them. I'm going to do the same thing on this one. Doesn't matter which end you start at, but I'm not pulling. I'm just matching up the concave and the convex seams so they come together. And look at that. What a beautifully drafted sleeve. So now I'm going to go ahead and sew this with my knit stitch or serge it, and I'm going to do the other side, and our sleeves are on. This top goes up in no time flat. All right, my sleeves are on and they look magnificent. So remember, we sewed them on this way, right? We haven't sewn the seam up and we haven't sewn the side seam. Now I want you to take a minute after you've sewn them and press them. This is a ham. This is the best time to press a sleeve because it's open. You're not dealing with the all enclosed. And whenever you press a garment, you want to press it flat, just the way you sewed it. And then with the sleeves, you want to press the seam towards the sleeve cap. And that gives the sleeve, it's a little bit of a structure. So that's what makes it look so beautiful. So this is a pressing hem. And if you don't have one, you can use like maybe a rolled up towel or something will work, but something to give you an opportunity to roll that sleeve around it. And they're great for collars and all kinds of other pressing things. And for pressing all kinds of other curved seams. Now, no matter what type of stitch you use, just be sure to use something that's going to stretch. You don't want to use your regular stitch. So on my old machine, there was a triple stitch. On my new machine, there's a lightning bolt stitch. If you don't have either of those, then you can use a very fine zigzag stitch. But you want to make sure that your garment's going to move with you and you're not going to pop any stitches. So we are now going to construct this facing. We're going to hem the front edge of the garment. And the front facing is piece 7A, and the back facing I think is piece 7B. And the back process is going to be exactly the same as the front. So we're going to put them right sides together and pin this facing all the way around. If you're at all nervous, you can mark the center of it and match those, but I mean, it lines up really well. So I'm just going to pin this on, and I'm going to stitch it all the way around, going slowly around the curves, right? And this one is really important that it stretches because this one goes over your hips, right? You sit down and pop some stitches on this, and your garment's going to kind of come apart. That would be bad in a lot of ways. All right, so I have it all pinned, and I'm going to take it to the machine, and I'm going to sew it 3/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to turn it to the other side. All right, I've sewn my facing, my hem facing, to the bottom of my front and back of my garment, and then you want to press it flat. And then if you press the facing and the seam allowance in the same direction, it will make it easier to turn this around and press it. So then you have a beautifully finished hem. Just take care at the corners so they stay nice and round, and then you're going to stitch it across and down and around. So this one is stitched. So it's stitched down, and from the right side, it looks absolutely beautiful. It's finished. It's gorgeous. Oops, I have a thread. It's finished. It's gorgeous. The corners look really nice. It's been pressed. So I'm going to go back and finish my other facing, and then the next step is to sew up the side seams and the arms. So once my other facing is sewn together, imagine that it's sewn together, I'm going to line up my side seams. I'm going to line up my side seams. I'm going to start with my underarm and match those underarm seams up. Now remember, both of our seams for the sleeve are pressed towards the sleeve, so we're going to start at the bottom of the garment because it'll make it easier to go through the feed of the machine. And I'm going to pin my sleeve so the edges match, and because this knit is a little slippery, I'm going to put a couple of extra pins in there. And with this version, we're going to start sewing right at the top of where our facing is. So we want to match those up really well. Because remember, this facing finishes the bottom of this facing finishes this bottom edge, and there's a slit in the side. So we don't want to sew through that. So because this fabric is a little slippery, I'm just matching up the raw edges and putting in a couple of pins. So here's my sleeve, here's my arm seam. I want to make sure that that's matched up. And then here's where my facings come together. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to sew all the way up to the arm seam, and I'm going to pivot a little, make sure my needle is down, pivot a little, and come all the way down to the back. one of the beauties of putting these facings on is that your garment is finished. When you sew like the final seams, this garment is going to be completely finished except for the facing that goes on the sleeve. And putting on facings give you a much nicer finish. They look more professional, and they're also easier to do in the long run. They're so much easier. So we're going to sew up the side seams. I'm going to finish my facing, sew up both of the side seams, and we're going to come back and do the arm facings, and we're done. So really super quick. We are in the home stretch. I have sewn up my sleeve and my side seams, and you can see we have our panels here for the front and the back, right? Really nice little panels there. And the next thing we're going to do is put on our sleeve facing, and then we are finished. So here is my top. Looking great. I have a sleeve here. And then the sleeve facing is piece 5B for the mid sleeve. So there's a different facing for each sleeve because the size of this opening changes, obviously. And you're going to do this very similar to the way we did the neck binding. You're going to sew it together in a circle, right sides together, and then you're going to fold it wrong sides together, pin, and baste this closed. So now you have one unit, because it's much easier to work with one unit than it is to work with two pieces kind of floating around. Especially with a knit, they're a little bouncy, and so that becomes a little bit of a problem. So now we're going to take this band and we're going to do it very similar to the way we did the neck edge, although it's quite a bit smaller. So we're just going to lay it on the outside of our sleeve, and I'm going to make sure that my seam allowance is pressed towards the back. I'm just going to pin it all the way around. This is why we baste it together, right? Because we don't have 3 pieces of fabric we're dealing with. We only have 2. And let's see how this goes, because this should fit like really perfectly. This pattern is drafted extremely well and everything fits great. See, yep, that goes right on there like that. No worries. So I'm going to take that to the machine. I'm going to stitch it, and then I'm going to flip it. And you can top stitch this with the twin needle stitching like you did with the neckline if that makes you happy. It doesn't call for it here on the pattern, but let's see how it looks. If it's flopping around or rolling back, a top stitching will work really well, but if not, then we're done. All right, we have finished our Cashemerette Concord tee. I love it. How cute is that? I'm going to take some close-up photos because the camera and the video just doesn't do it justice. The sleeve, we finished the facing on the sleeve. It looks beautiful. I didn't twin needle it. You could go back and twin needle it if you liked, but it looks perfect. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some pictures, and they'll be in the accompanying blog post. You'll see a few here sprinkled in and out of the video also, but if you click through, you'll find all the information on the patterns and the kits and how to get the fabric and everything else you need to get this shirt made and get started on your wardrobe of Concord tees, because they're gorgeous. So I hope you enjoyed this video on the Concord tee and sewing knits. Please subscribe to our channel. We would love to have you. We have lots of sew-alongs and lots of fun, interesting things going on. So until next time, this is Sandi for Sewing with Sandi. Bye.